If you are wondering about the future of work, the role of AI in that future, and how it will impact your team, your work, and the demands on you as a leader, you are in the right place. We are going to peek into that future, but you will leave with specific things that you can do today. Welcome to another episode of the Remarkable Leadership Podcast, where we are helping leaders grow personally and professionally to lead more effectively and make a bigger positive difference for their teams, organizations, and the world. If you are listening to this podcast, you could join us in the future for live episodes on your favorite social media channel. You can get all future live episode updates, find out when those are happening, so you can interact with us and get this information sooner by joining our Facebook or LinkedIn groups. Just go to remarkablepodcast.com/Facebook or remarkablepodcast.com/LinkedIn. While nearly all of our episodes are first live streamed on a variety of social media platforms, this episode was recorded as a part of our annual Virtual LeaderCon event. You can learn more and sign up for announcements about next year's free to attend event at virtualleadercon.com. Welcome back, everybody. You are in for a treat. How do I know that? Because I've already talked to this young lady in the past. See, this is going to be a slightly different kind of session. Here's why. Because Nada and I were going to have a conversation live, and the stars didn't quite align, and because it was going to be on our podcast, the Remarkable Leadership Podcast. But since the stars didn't quite align, I asked her if she would join us for this, and she said she could. And so since she agreed to do this, we're still going to make this a podcast episode. So I'm going to ask a couple of different questions that I normally ask in the podcast that I haven't asked today. And it'll be an awesome podcast episode because it'll have all of your input along the way in the chat and in the Q&A. So let me introduce Nada Sanders, and then we will dive in. We're going to talk about how AI can help you create a super intelligent enterprise. And our guest today is Nada R. Sanders, PhD from, this is for you, Josh, The Ohio State University. She's an internationally recognized AI thought leader, expert in forecasting and global supply chain intelligence, and a distinguished professor at the Diarmuid McKim School of Business at Northeastern University in Boston, ranked by Stanford as, get this, one of the top 2% of scientists in the world. I'm not sure why I'm even interviewing her. I should just hand this over to her. She's a sought after speaker and author of 100 plus top tier scholarly publications in 7 books, including The Human Machine, AI, Human Virtues, and the Super Intelligent Enterprise. Welcome, Nada. Glad to have you here.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me, and welcome everybody.
So I've been looking forward to this because I loved your book when I read it in preparation for our conversation before. I guess the big idea here is this idea called super intelligence. So what does it mean to be a super intelligent organization or enterprise? Let's start right there.
Yeah, it's a great question. And let me just preface that by saying I'm trying really hard I'm doing ongoing work and research. This isn't just like, oh, I did the work, published the book, and I'm done. I'm literally doing it all the time and adding to it. And the reason is we're all in this crazy state of hype, Kevin, where, and everybody listening knows this, AI and what are we going to do? And is it going to take over the world? Or are we going to lose our jobs? How do we reskill? All of that. And I have a lot that I would love to share, but just kind of to answer the question, the super intelligent enterprise isn't meant to be anything sci-fi or anything magical. It's really, it is the enterprise of the future and the way it is going to function in order to be able to be competitive in this new space. And it is through the combination of AI technologies and human judgment. And that is together what we've seen, that these two pieces together actually create, it's a symbiosis, and it's a situation where it's greater than the sum of the parts. Humans alone, we're great, but we need technological help. AI, look, it's fantastic as far as access to data, and you and I and everybody know, out there listening, it's fantastic in so many ways. but there are so many errors. It's only when you bring these two together in the right way that you end up having an intelligent enterprise that is greater and better than the sum of each of those. And that's really what we mean by super intelligent enterprise.
1 plus 1 equals 11.
That's
So there you go.
exactly it.
C1 and 1, 11. Okay, so here's the thing. When I got the book in the mail, when your publisher pitched this book to us several months ago, here's the first thing that I noticed. This is called the human machine, AI, human virtues, and the super intelligent enterprise. Everyone here would say, okay, that's a book that's just come out. That makes sense. Except this is the second edition. Like
Yeah.
everybody, this is why she's a top 2% scientist in the world.
Thank
Because
you.
she wrote a book with this title before we could spell Chat GPT. Like this is not her first rodeo with this. Like
Thank you.
you've been thinking about this for a long time. So how is it that you've come to been thinking about this so long?
It's a great question because it has been a
That's my
really,
job,
really
to ask good questions.
yeah, no, it's a great question, and there's so much that I want to share with everybody listening. So, my career, my PhD is in operations and supply chain management, but my expertise is in forecasting, prediction, decision making. And so when I was very young in my, 20s, when I was just starting out, I come out of the STEM area. I was in the modeling. And then I'm a doctoral student, my first foray with business companies, and I'm green, okay? I'm going in and I thought I was going to go in and showcase some great forecasting models. But then when you start working with companies, you realize over and over, it's about humans. It's about people make decisions. And there is a whole host of things. So slowly over time, over decades, I've been doing this for 25 years now. I have worked exclusively with companies, and it all has to do with technology and humans, whether it's CEOs, SVPs, managers, teams of people, and how do they take that output? And in most cases, today, they still override it. And a lot of times it's a good thing. Okay, sometimes it's not a good thing. So, how does that interplay take place? So, you fast forward to where we are, and in 2018 and 2019, I was specifically doing research going into companies to see what can AI technologies do for businesses. And what I wanted to do was identify what makes leaders lead in this area. What makes these great companies? And I'm telling you, without exception, not a single exception, every company, and the companies I'm talking about, everybody would know the names, their household names. Everybody said the secret is people. And we were like, wow, really? So we came in from the idea that we were going to see these incredible AI solutions, only to have every company say it. And I'm not kidding. The secret is people. We got people to believe, da da da. I just went on and on. That was the first edition of the Human Machine book. That was eye opening. It came out December 2019. And we all know what then happened in 2020, 2021. We were then asked to redo the book after COVID, post COVID. I did all the interviews, dozens and dozens of CEOs, SVPs. And what was interesting, Kevin, is that what had changed, it wasn't that the secret was just people, but now it was a real focus on interpersonal communication. It was a real focus on the idea that digital literacy, that AI capability was actually becoming somewhat commonplace, meaning that if Pepsi has it, Coke has it, kind of a thing. But what is the difference? The difference is having talent that can really know how to negotiate, talent that has human skills, talent that can build relationships, that can communicate. And that came out time and time again. And no lie, it was on steroids. So that is what is different. And I'm constantly evolving with what is happening. And I am seeing that actually recently, earlier this summer, was talking to some people in HR in some of the leading companies in this space, and everybody would know. And I am not sure whether I should give the name or not because it was one of those luncheon kind of things. But they said, we no longer ask people if they can code when we're interviewing. We're asking about their interpersonal skills. We're asking about their communication skills, their ability to talk to others. So it's been a real shift. And for me, it has really been a journey in terms of learning. And that's the one thing I can say that I think is different from, I've been doing this for a long time. I know what I know, but I know what I don't know. And I'm always learning. And because of where I'm at, I can call out BS. I really can. And right now, guys, we got a million talking heads out there, and everybody seems to say, oh, this is what it's going to be. We really don't know. We can just take best guesses and keep evolving and learning.
That's the prediction part of you. So in our book, The Long Distance Teammate, we talked about the idea that your job is your work plus the work of the team, which would include all, like, like, I'm an excellent coder, I can do all that stuff. That's not the whole job. But if someone thinks that's the whole job, they're missing the rest. And so your point about the, what do you want to call it, the soft skills, the interpersonal skills, the communication skills, all that stuff, even more important, obviously, as we've been talking all day, when we're doing this in a distributed or remote or hybrid way, all of that, I think, is absolutely true. There's so much I want to get to as questions, but I have my expectations from this group is, if they have questions, I got to ask some of theirs. And there are some really good ones. Dan asked a question. I think he's asked a question every single session. Here it is. With 20% of business data being used today, will we get better at strategic activities and fast track innovation? I'm assuming he's saying when we get better at using the AI tools. What's your thought about that?
It's a great question. I'm not so sure. And let me explain. One of the rules in forecasting, and I could tell you, I've been doing this for a long time, and this is a form of forecasting, right? Large language models, they're models. One of the really important rules is that you have really good, clean data. The garbage in, garbage out thing. You've got to have really good data. All the LLMs have so far worked off of human generated data that is out there, whether it's on the internet, they've been scraped. What's going to happen over time is you're going to have, whether it's a private LLM or whether it's the chat GPTs and so forth, there's going to have more and more data that is going to be LLM generated. So you could end up getting into the kind of a thing where we say, the snake eating its own tail kind of a thing. And you end up actually getting more and more hallucinations and more garbage. So I think there's a real question in terms of how are we going to handle the data? Is it, again, public versus private, or is it being cleaned? Is it, again, LLM generated? That's really important. Then there's another part that I think is, because you asked about strategic decision making. So here's the thing. One of the executives pointed out to me, I interviewed him this past year. It was a CEO of Kinaxis, and it was a really brilliant comments. He said, when COVID hit, all the math-based solutions collapsed. And he said it's not an indictment of the models. It's simply that they didn't have the data. So when you're looking, exactly. So
we have no model that can tell us what's going to happen in a pandemic, right?
Exactly. So we have to be aware, strategic, because the question was about strategic, not about tactical, not about what I'm ordering, for the next week for sales. But if I'm looking at strategic area, and I have to pay attention to what is going on in the business environment, in the geopolitics, in every aspect, competition, I have to, and this is where expert knowledge comes in, where you as somebody who knows your business comes in, and you've got to know, does that algorithm, does it have all the data? Can I trust it? Can it be an input into what I decide? But ultimately, you're going to have to carry the weight of what that decision is.
There's a couple of other great questions that people have posed, but because I know what I want to ask, I'm going to ask one of my questions because I think it connects. So one of the things, one of the first things I highlighted in the book is Kasparov's law, and it just struck me, and I don't really know why exactly, but I think it's foundational to everything that we're talking about. It certainly connects to a couple of the questions people have. So can you tell people what Kasparov's law is and what we should take from it?
Yes. So absolutely, Kevin, it is so foundational. And it's really amazing to me that it hasn't, I'm going to write more on it, guys, because it hasn't gotten enough press as it should. There's nothing, crazy complicated about it. So Gary Kasparov, as most of you know, he was the or is the grand chess master, but he was the first one that was beat out by a computer, IBM's Deep Blue. He lost the match, and he was so upset about it. He held his own competition subsequent to the loss. And basically, what it was a competition to pit man versus machine, if you will. So there were some amazing leading chess players, there were computer algorithms, and then there were teams of chess players with algorithms. What came out of the competition, who won the competition, was a couple of novices who were completely unknown. They really didn't have a name or anything. And their algorithm wasn't that fancy either. When they dissected what made the winning formula, what it was the process. It was the way that this algorithm interacted with these two guys in this case. So, what came out of this, and after looking at all the data and what came to be known as Kasparov's law, is that an average person with an average computer with the right process, if they're connected with the right process, can outperform a superior computer and a superior person. I think that is darn huge. I
I
mean,
do
it's
too.
huge,
I
right?
just I had to read it like four times.
Exactly. Why? We're out there chasing the AI, but the lesson is you need a good algorithm, you need a good AI, you need a good technology, you need good people. Okay, we got it. But the secret is how they're combined, how they're integrated. And that's going to vary from company to company. Are you a startup? Are you a mature firm? How do you compete? Do you compete on cost? Do you compete on, innovation? What market are you in? I mean, it's like a whole host of issues. But how you enable the people to make decisions, how do you bring them together in order to use the output from the algorithm for like rote things, and then use the people who are experts for what they do? That's the secret. The secret is not to put the money in the greatest and latest tech. And actually, so that's Kasparov's law. And one of the things that I'm seeing, and it just really bothers me, one, we already mentioned the hype. Good God, I've been doing this for a long time. I've seen the hype. Oh, Kevin, I've seen the hype. We saw it years ago with TQM, total quality management. I have so many stories that are almost, I couldn't even write them because people would say, well, that's not true. It didn't really happen. Well, it did. They're silly. Companies make dumb decisions. And, Kasparov's law says we keep our talented people and we look at the process, we look at our processes. We don't lay technology on bad processes. We look at the process, our business model, and how they are combined together. One of the CEOs I interviewed, and I can say this because I have permission to do that, was Spencer Funk from Li & Fung in Hong Kong. And one of the things he said to me that I thought was so well put, he said, companies that don't rethink or just reassess their business model in this new era, is kind of like a company that is digitizing a horse and buggy while their competition is creating a digital automobile. And I thought that was great because you cannot just assume that your old business model is going to work. Have to rethink it. Maybe it will, depends. But you have to think about it. And then the other thing is do not lay off automatically your older skilled talent. Actually, I have a section in the book. I think I called them, the gray haired talent or the, affectionately your gray haired brigade. But what we call domain knowledge or domain expertise is really important. People that know the business. And while you're going to get young people coming in, that's great. And they bring value, of course. People that have been in the business for a long time also have tremendous value. And it is really a huge mistake to get rid of those people that you probably pay more, replace them with AI. That's a mistake. You really, as a company, need to have teams that are diverse with senior leaders, experienced people, young people, and then all meshed up with the AI, the technology that you're using as a tool. And that's all it is. It's a tool.
So that leads to a question. I'm going to take you from there, like, which I think is a really important point that you just made that people might have missed, which is just getting rid of people isn't necessarily the right answer.
Yeah.
And obviously, the big thing that you've been talking about is this idea of how important the processes are, and do we have the right processes and all that. So connected to both of those, I think, is the question that James asks. Even though James's question, I think, is far more sort of practical, right? But I think it's absolutely your answer, I'm guessing, is going to be connected to all that you've just been saying. So James asks, in small to mid-sized companies, where is the best use or benefit of adding AI tools to help employees? So, but I think it's connected to what you've been saying. But now, can you sort of contextualize that and maybe be a little more pragmatic about that?
Yeah, no, it's a really good question, especially because SMEs, I mean, small and medium enterprises, tend to be tend to have less cash flow, tend to be a little more strapped. Um, they tend to you tend to see people that have many hats, wear many hats. There's good and bad in that. The bad in it is, of course, again, you don't have the cash flow to be able to just really jump into large LLMs, large AI. You've got people that are really, working 24/7 doing a lot of different things. The good news with that is you actually are much more agile, whereas a larger company is not going to be that. Um, I think it really depends. It's really hard to answer because, again, are we service manufacturing, da da da. Having said that, I think um, using AI tools for more rote things is a lot better. You can automate, like, very, very tactical. Let's say I'm ordering the ordering process. If I'm ordering C inventory items, I can completely automate that. There's no reason for me to engage. You really need to leave your talent to negotiate for strategic sourcing, with your, A suppliers, or satisfy your A customers, or walk out for those A inventory items that are really, really critical. But I think when you come down to the road things, the things that can be automated, I think that is absolutely where you would bring the AI. Because what you want to do, and I think this is for small and medium size, you really want to leave bandwidth for that talent to be able to do a lot of the various tasks that they do. Because as humans, as people, I mean, we have limited ability to traverse, to think, to process. I mean, we get tired, only so much. And after a while, you're like, it's happy hour time, can't do this anymore. Right. So
Not yet, everybody. It's not happy
not
hour
yet,
yet.
everybody.
Just saying.
Not yet. but but you know what I mean. So you've got to leave them, you know, for the really important, really impactful decisions. How will you do that? Automate the rote stuff, the very tactical things that are rote, and then really be careful to leave the important stuff for the staff, for talent.
Related to that is a question that came in early, and I didn't ask it yet, but I'm going to ask it now because it actually connects not to one of the sessions that came before you, where we were talking about um, uh, heart versus head, right, within the human, and now we're talking about the AI. So the question is, and there's a longer question. I'm just going to give you the heart of it here. In your eyes, does super intelligence mean more human and more heart?
That's a really good question, and it's something I'm really wrestling with. In my mind, it better mean more heart. And one of the things I really want to do is, and I'm actually thinking of research. If anybody out there has ideas, connect with me on LinkedIn. I want to make a strong business case, Kevin, for that. Because everything is so short-sighted. What's the ROI? How do we get the payback? What is the turn in the business? But I think if we look at a little bit of a longer period of time and we look at how decisions are made and whether we want to truly stay in business, at the end of the day, there are exceptions, of course. I mean, there are businesses that are really automated. You look at, a lot of industries, energy sector. I mean, there's really a lot of things that we can look at that are automated. But the majority, I can tell you, ultimately, the final decision when it comes to a big client, a big supplier, it comes down to the heart. And I've seen this, and I know everybody out there has seen this time and time again. It's going to come to that decision. Maybe in the short run, you'll make it based on that very quick, automated, but not in the long run. So if we were to answer that and say, what is this enterprise going to look like? I think, I personally think that the super intelligence that is really fully driven by automation is going to be more copyable. I can copy that. Again, the Pepsi Coke thing. But what makes you different? We've got a lot of things that are going on that are impacting businesses, from climate change to what's going on with suppliers, what's going on with workers. I mean, just the worker issue is a huge thing. Companies talk about and give lip service to our talent is our most precious resource, but most of them that I know don't really, do what they preach. The reality of it really is. And as we move into more and more cyber issues, cyber attacks, a business needs to know what to do when there is an event. And there's going to be more and more events. Who knows how to handle those events? It's people that have experience. It's people that can, call up. I talk to executives and CEOs all the time. After COVID, I remember talking to an SVP for one of the big um, uh, airline industry, and I have to be careful. It wasn't Boeing, okay? Uh,
They got enough problems.
yeah, they got enough problems. But this senior vice president said to me, he said, "You know what the best thing that we did was during COVID?" I said, "What?" He said, "We literally picked up the phone and called our suppliers, and it was a phone call, and it was like, what can we do for you? How are you doing? How are you guys doing? How's your team doing? What can we do to help you?" And it was that personal one-on-one call. And I mean, I didn't solicit this. This is what the guy told me. So I think it's those kinds of enterprises that are going to stand out and that are ultimately going to rule the day. The other ones are going to make gains in the short run, without question. But it's the long run, um, you know, that I think who's going to be left standing. And I think those are the companies.
You were saying that about the airline executives saying we picked up the
Yes.
phone, and so it made me think of something that probably not more than 10% of the people here will even remember. But back in the day, there was a commercial on television. I believe it was for United Airlines, and the guy comes in to the business and the executive and says, "Listen, we're not paying attention to our customers. we got to quit talking to him on the phone and we got to go visit him. And he starts handing out airline tickets. And it made me think of that. And of course, during COVID, they couldn't do that because we couldn't go see people. But
Right.
it's so interesting. It's kind of paradoxical because in your case, the airline people, the flying people are saying we're going to pick up the phone. In that case, it was let's not use the phone. Let's get on an airplane. But the point is, all of that goes back to what we're talking about. It's about the human piece of this that is so very critical. There's been so much great stuff going on in the chat, but there's a couple things I really want to make sure that I ask you about that are in the book. And I think that you might be the most qualified person that I know to ask this question because you wrote a book that talked about AI in 2018. Oh
Thank
my
you.
gosh, I can't believe you found that so quickly, Marissa. Gold star, because that commercial is awesome and I'm going to watch it tonight. So send that
It's
to me in
great.
Slack because I won't see it again here again, Marissa. So the question is this: what are the unfounded worries about AI? What are the myths that you could maybe put our minds a little bit at ease about all that?
It's again, you guys have some really great questions, and nothing is carved in stone. We don't know exactly how the future is going to play out. And I do worry about regulation as far as the data privacy, in terms of our, data that we voluntarily give out, all of us, and how it can be used to track us and the kind of information we are getting. I think the unfounded worry at this point, at least, I think is, the AGI. And one of the books that I'm currently reading is Kurzweil's, The Singularity is Near. I'm not worried about the cyborgs as far as, everything being taken over. What I am worried about is humans using the technology against humans. That's the part that I worry about. I'm not worried about machines taking over. I think that is, and if we are, I think that if we become aware of that, then we can. And I'm not really big on regulation in general. So I'm hoping that there's wise people. I'm hoping that somehow we find, because we do regulate certain industries to a certain extent. But right now, so much of everyone's private data is being used by a handful of companies. My concern is the businesses that are really, they're making money off of me and you. They really are. I'm not worried about the machines against us. I'm worried about humans using the technology against us. I'm not worried about AGI and the rogue robot that's going to go out and do uh, crazy things that we see. I'm worried about how we increasingly become, manipulated. We all see it, even in what appear to be benign ways, in terms of, shopping, in terms of, we all know that, you know, one of the CEOs that I interviewed, we were just talking about, he was explaining to me how on Instagram, for example, um, when one posts and then they get liked, you get a certain number of likes, right? But those likes, how and when you see those likes is optimized in order for you to get the highest hit of dopamine in order for you to keep coming back. So let's say hypothetically you got 10 likes. Instagram's not going to in real time share 10 likes. Rather, it's going to dole those out, kind of like a little bit of like a drug pusher. Here's a little bit, just enough, because I want you to keep checking. And then maybe I'll give you a couple more, then you keep checking. That's what worries me. I worry about that. I don't worry about the rogue robot that's going to come down the street and get us. Not now, anyways.
Abby asks, and I'm going to answer this one because it's the first one that's been asked that I actually can answer. Abby asks, what's the law you've been discussing? It is Kasparov's law from the book. Holds that weak human plus machine plus better process is superior to strong computer alone, and more remarkably, superior to strong human plus machine plus inferior process. Kasparov's law. There you go, Abby. So
And Kevin, I didn't make it up. It's real. And
believe
why companies don't put money in getting the right process? It's going to be a heck of a lot less. It doesn't mean that you're not using technology, okay? But rather than going crazy, because remember this is evolving really quickly. Today's state of the art is tomorrow's legacy. So a company has to be really smart in terms of what they're acquiring technology. This stuff ain't cheap either. Okay. So, so a company has to be really strategic in what they're acquiring, how they're using it, rather than constantly trying to get the latest and greatest.
well, and it's seductive to just go out and throw money at the problem or throw money at the shiny object, right? So we just have to really work to get
Absolutely.
over that, and that's why I think that the winners will be smaller companies, not the
I do
companies
too, actually.
with the most resources,
I,
because
I agree. I
that
agree.
I believe to be true. Um, so I have a couple of other things I want to ask you about, and one of the things you talk about in the book a lot that I don't think anyone would expect we were going to talk about next, and that's why I want to do it. Let's talk about hiring. How should, given the stuff that we've been talking about here, what should we be thinking about in terms of hiring? Because most of the people here are not CEOs. CEOs are usually not the ones doing the hiring anywhere. Anyway, so like we're mid-level leaders, we're frontline leaders, we're doing hiring, and we may be doing more of it than we want to do just to keep up. But the question is, what should we be, based on what you've been learning and what you're seeing? What advice do you have for us about hiring?
Um, I really think, just like what I've been hearing, is hiring people that are really high energy, innovative, and willing to learn and have great human skills. One of the companies that I spoke with, and I'm debating whether to give their name or not. Everybody would know it. I spoke with this. One of the people was this really high energy analyst that was, and then the company had hired a huge team of these really young but high energy, talented people willing to learn. And I asked them, and the analyst said to me, he said, once they hired one of us, then we had that energy to when they were bringing people in to interview, then we met them, and an environment where people were willing to fail but really eager, where they're really wanting to make a difference. That is far more important, I think, today than the traditional pedigree, the traditional grades, the ability to code. And I'm a STEM person, but what we need the ability to understand the business. And so I think a big part of the interview process is, querying and asking, um, you know, questions that don't really have an answer, but to see what their logic is, strategic. There was a company that I spoke with. They had an opening for supply chain analysts, and that job was open for 3 months, and not because there weren't applicants. There were hundreds of applicants. And the way the interview process went is that the people came in, they were given a set of data, part of the real life data, the company's real life data. Part of the data was missing. Every person said, well, I analyzed this data, and this is what the strategy is for this and this part of the data. But over here, I don't have the data, so I don't know, can't make a decision there. The company would say, that is what we're looking for. What do you do when you don't have data? Tell us what we do under those circumstances. So we're looking for people less, I think, that have a fancy pedigree, but people that, might have a very unique background, an interesting background, where they're learning, they're growing, they have maturity, um, and willingness to learn and grow with the company. I think that is far more important than the traditional pedigree skills.
Thank you for that. Um, I always ask in the podcast, and I ask it near the end, and I'm going to do it a little earlier here, but in the podcast, I always ask my guests what they do for fun. So, Nada, what do you do for fun?
You know, I work out. I go to the gym. Gym is really fun. Family and friends, um, music, concerts. And as time has gone on, and as we have become so much more immersed in AI, and God knows I have too, I have noticed with me that I am really enjoying the company of people, humans, real fellowship of humans.
It is
And
shocking, everyone.
I know, right? And so, I mean, really connecting. And it's given me pleasure in ways that I'd forgotten about, because we were locked down during COVID, and then all day I might stare at a screen, meeting friends, even colleagues. It has really given me a lot of just joy. And the other thing too is I actually have been reading real books, and I know that's not everybody's got their. I like real books. I like to touch them. I like to feel them. And I really think that, yes, exactly. Exactly. So most of the stuff that I'm finding is really being in the real space and getting away from the virtual. That has been in every aspect a real joy. Real life concerts, small restaurants, you know, all that is interactive in a real space, not a virtual space.
Well, since we're talking about books, it's very clear for all of you that are here live at VLC, and you're just here, Nada, but these people, especially those that have been here a while, they all love books. They all want me to give them books, and I'm going to give some books out in a few minutes, everybody. We're almost there where I will give out a couple of books, but I want to know, Nada, what you're reading. You're reading The Singularity, you said,
I
and so on the
am.
podcast, we'll put all these note in the show notes, and for those of you
Yeah.
on VLC, you can take notes, and I'm sure those will show up in the premium as well, and they may show up on the chat here as we go. But what else are you reading these days?
So a lot of Kurzweil. I mean, he had initially The Age of Intelligent Machines. So it's been really interesting. He's been the singularity person. He's been the person that has told us how this was going to evolve. And what I try to do, what I think is really important is in this time period, is to triangulate between sources. So you have people that are really die hard, like Singularity's coming just like he is. But then I will go back and then I will look at it. In this case, we're talking about Substack, where people like Gary Marcus, where I'm looking at people and reading people that might actually debunk a lot of this stuff. What is really important, I think, for everybody right now is to go to different sources and to try to create their own opinions of what they think, and just do not isolate yourself in one bubble or one source, but really be open and form your own opinion. And that's really what I try to do, rather than staying with one that tells me this is how it life is going to be. We really don't know. And so that, and I am reading, believe it or not, on my nightstand, James Joyce um, literature, because there's just a real beauty in what humans have created over um, centuries and centuries. And it just kind of reminds me of what humans are really, really capable of. In fact, one of the things I just want to throw out, I don't know if anybody out there, I just saw this was an op-ed piece in the New York Times. I don't even know the name of the person who wrote it. It was a writer. He put up three short stories. Two were written by Gen AI. One was written by him. He's a writer. And he does this challenge where he says, um, can you figure out which one was written by me and which one was written by ChatGPT? And so it's kind of a fun game to play, and I enjoy doing that because I do find that there's something human in the articles and the pieces that are written by humans.
There you go, everybody. So I'm going to give some books away, everybody, in just a minute. I promise you, they will go there. Can you see? She's already got it right there. Can you tell which short story Chat GPT wrote?
That's great. Yeah, that's great.
So where can we learn more? Where do you want to point people? By the way, I'm going to give away some books, everybody, but I'm not giving away my copy of Nada's book. I'm keeping it.
Thank you.
Sorry about that. You'll have to order your own copy. The Human Machine, AI, Human Virtues, and the SuperIntelligent Enterprise. Where do you want to point people? You mentioned LinkedIn a little bit ago. Where can people learn more about what you're up to and connect with you?
Yeah, so two places. One is my own website, nadasanders.com. You can send an email to me through nadasanders.com. It's got all my stuff on there, and LinkedIn. I respond to everybody. I really do. So, reach out, connect. Happy to help, hear your thoughts. Looking forward to it.
Tamara says, will you send your Post-it markers in the books this year so we can all mark our books that we win? Am I going to send? I have to send you all Post-it markers? Go to Amazon, y'all. Just go to Amazon. I'm not going to send those to you, Tamara. Come on. I can lead the horse to water, right? There you go. Okay, we should give some books away. I'm going to give away 4 books. I have picked the people. Here they are. To James Meyer, I believe, who asked a question in the chat that we talked about. I'm going to send you a copy of The Long Distance Teammate, because we were talking about that in terms of the human part of work is more than just the technical expertise. Tamara, I have to have a little fun with you. So I'm completely calm as Kevin gets. James gets a copy of this. And because we're talking to someone this is going to be on the podcast, I did this last year and I'm doing it again. So if you all can imagine, if you do 50 podcasts a year and nearly all 52 ish, and nearly every one of them is with someone who has a book, and you don't do the podcast unless you read the book, that means there's lots of books. Now, I love books and I'd like to keep them all, but I made some decisions. I'm going to give some of them away. So I have some books down here, and I'm not going to tell you which ones, but I am going to say that some of them that I'm going to give away have Kevin's marks in them, right? So I'm going to give away 3 of them right now. And I'm not going to say who's getting what because we don't have time to deal with that. But the 3 people that are going to get books from the podcast, from past podcast guests, are Tom Alway, Kenya, and Michelle Harmon. You know the drill. Can we see you can pre-mark? I do pre-mark them. See, this one's got a lot in here. Look at all those in there, everybody. So I'm going to, those 3 people plus James have to, you know the drill. You have to send your name and email address, or excuse me, name and mailing address, physical book, info@kevineikenberry.com, and those will get there. It's in the chat as well. I've got one more question for you, Nada, before we
I'm
go.
seeing lovely thank yous, and I really appreciate it.
Well, because it's warranted. That's why. So before we wrap this, a question I've asked every guest so far and plan to do for the next couple of days is, what's the biggest lesson you've learned this year?
I don't know if it's necessarily this year, but for me, one of the biggest lessons is that the key to success is just to keep showing up. It's just keep showing up. You don't have to be the smartest. You don't have to be the most knowledgeable, the most competent, but you keep getting up over and over. And then when something good doesn't happen, when we all have failures, you learn from it. And that is, to me, I think the biggest, the most fundamental, what makes me, I think, different in a lot of ways. Honestly, I won't tell you I know everything. When I don't know something, I will tell you. And in fact, I've had my students say to me, some of my MBAs say, "Oh, Dr. Sanders, you should say you know everything." And I make a joke and I'll say, well, if you want somebody to tell you they know everything, hire Accenture or McKinsey, and they're going to tell you they know everything, and they're going to hire you accordingly because they know everything. I know enough to know that we're learning all the time. Just keep getting up when something goes wrong. Try to analyze, what did you self-correct? How could you do better? And then you get up again. That's the secret.
We've been talking with Dr. Nada Samuels, Nada Sanders, the author of The Hue Machine, which I highly recommend. And so for all of you that are here on VLC, you know the drill. We'll be back. I'll be back with you in a couple minutes. But for those of you that have been joining us later on the Remarkable Leadership Podcast, thanks for being here. I will ask all of you on the podcast what I always ask you. And the question is, now what? What action will you take now as a result of having listened to the wise Nada Sanders? I hope that you answer that question, because it's only then that any real good will come from this. And then secondly, I hope you'll come back for another episode of the Remarkable Leadership Podcast. And for, again, all of you on VLC, I'll see you all in a couple of minutes. Thanks again, Sam. Nada.